Did you know that the E.G.Os of Limbus company have lots of symbolism? In the Project Moon franchise, you could tell a lot about a character's main themes by simply going over what E.G.Os they can equip. This is of course because the E.G.O, the name being telling enough, is a type of personalized equipment or weapon manifested from the rarest mind. So much so that every time I try to analyze them, a 50-minute video turns into an hour. So with the fact that it's Christmas time, I wanted to make a more short and sweet video about the Christmas E.G.Os and Christmas in Limbus company. I'll take a look at the symbolism in the voice lines, the art, and the whole context in general to try to relate them to the story of Project Moon and a related character. If you enjoy videos like these, why not stick around? And if you like it, subscribe! The support means a lot to me, thank you! Now let's get on with it. It's honestly a really funny idea in general that Christmas is a thing in Project Moon. It first gets referenced in Canto 3 in Limbus company, with Gregor making a messed up reminder of it to Sinclair, since his family got slimed on Christmas Eve. There is a set date or time when Christmas gets celebrated, and for some reason every time Christmas is referenced in Limbus company, the characters say it's far off from the actual Christmas date. If we were to look at the time Miracle in District 20 was running, it was December 28th to January 25th. Which would be odd since it's technically right after Christmas, but then again release dates most likely aren't related to the actual canon date it is in Limbus. When we look at how it gets celebrated though, it's almost the exact same as in our world. Christmas trees, bright decorations, and of course gift giving. This tradition is spread all the way to the outskirts. How could they share this tradition in the first place? Crazy theory, but I think this means that the city and outskirts were more similar in the past, if not the same place, perhaps even based off of our universe. Since if Korean doesn't even know what life in the city is like, but does celebrate Christmas, culture sharing must have been cut off between the two parts, but if they both celebrate Christmas, it must have been a really old tradition that stuck with both the city and the outskirts, and if it's possible, maybe even a place outside both of these areas. This is actually supported by the abnormality Rudolta from the Lobotomy Corporation, as the E.G.O weapon and the suit talk about a festive holiday that is now long forgotten. But it's odd, as in Limbus it's still celebrated. Maybe the forgotten part is just the actual pure origins of Christmas, or Christmas has been retconned. The weapon funnily enough says that what truly is under the carefully stitched leather is a secret, that of course being a reference to a carefully picked out gift. Christmas Eve here is still known as the Holy Night, as Sinclair wanted to confess his actions with Cromer that evening, implying that it probably has the same religious origins. Now I do wonder why Sinclair doesn't have a Christmas E.G.O, although the Christmas might not fit literal for him, if not also just too traumatic for him. But I do notice that the sinners that have an identity or ego in relation with Christmas usually have a side to them that they don't want others to see. Outis pretends to bootlick Dante, while not really wanting to show what she really thinks. Heathcliff pretends to be tough but is actually a lover boy inside. Gregor has an arm which he doesn't want others to see in case it goes rogue, and Ishmael has a gruesome side that she hid from the other sinners as well. Remember, only Dante was able to see that fantasy of hers ripping out the guts of Ahab, and of course Rodion is secretly miserable but puts on a smile and literally decorates herself to be jolly. Also, I wanted to mention that the monsters in Miracle District attack right before Christmas usually, meaning that their sentience goes as far as knowing the dates or at least recognizing Christmas decorations in the outskirts. But why? Outskirts monsters are still quite unclear, but that they attack and live in relation to Christmas makes me think that they might be more related to abnormalities than others might think, or just the river. Let's look at the actual E.G.Os. I'm going to start off right away with a hard one, a sinner whose canto we haven't had yet, so it'll be quite hard to speculate, but I'm gonna try my best. Of course, it's way longer than the other parts because I love me some theorizing. Now this E.G.O is related to Sandolph, which is also related to that Rudolpha thing I was talking about earlier. The first connection I could make between this abnormality and outis is how the E.G.O suit has a text saying, "Does it still keep the dream of being a nice kid, deserving of gifts?" Now this deserving part is interesting, as outis before has stated that she thinks she might have not been capable or deserving of being loved, since she actually had a huge part in the Smoke War. She has made thousands of victims, so she might actually assume she doesn't deserve love, symbolized by the gifts. Honestly, I wanted to look at the abnormality itself to find connections, and Jesus, this thing is terrifying. So much so that it suggested that whoever made this thing must have had a great hatred for Christmas. Again, why doesn't Sinclair have this E.G.O? I'll get to that in a second. Anyways, flavored text seemed to hint at the fact that this is a version of Santa of those who are unhappy, and that the sleigh of Rudolta shows no signs of life, yet it still moves nonetheless. This again might be connected to outis in the way that she's secretly unhappy, and maybe she was in the Smoke War as well. In a way, dead inside, yet still moved and gave around orders or listened to orders. In the war, outis might have been stuck in her position, almost in a way like Gregor, and was forced to act out horrible orders. This could also be symbolized with the chains around the, I can't even call that hooves, showing that it's somewhat stuck in its place, almost like a toy horse being played around by someone else. The Christmas lights are bound around its neck tightly, carrying the sleigh with it. This could symbolize the guilt outis could have felt about the deaths of the war, carrying the guilt with her literally, although probably forced upon her by someone else, as it chokes her out. The gruesome nature of the festiveness could also be the hollow celebrations of a war, as when you take a part of the opposition and win, there must have been bloodshed even though it's celebrated. Now the actual abnormality this E.G.O is based off of, Sandolph, doesn't appear in the actual game itself. It only exists for these E.G.Os, really, hence why I'm talking more about Rudolta. What both of these abnormalities have in common though, is that their face is open and held up by stitches, which I don't really know what that could symbolize, as you could say it's forced openness, gifts, but at the same time, the whole idea of gifts is holding secrets, which fits more with the theme of the Christmas E.G.Os and the sinners in general. These abnormalities are opposite in the way that Rudolta is more the red-nosed reindeer, and Sandals seem to be more related to Santa. Now, to actually look at the E.G.O itself, the voice line, "I'll stuff your futile wrath in his gift sack and hurl it right back at your face," this futile wrath could honestly be another reference to the war. A war can be seen as futile by some, and stuffing that wrath in a sack is how Outis indeed carries guilt about that wrath with her, and uses that guilt, perhaps as motivation, to hurl it right back into someone else's face. Now this could be a reference to how Outis is holding out revenge for someone, not in a blind obsession way, but perhaps similar, as it was released during Bon Voyage, and Heathcliff also has the E.G.O, someone who also has a need for revenge. Dare I say Ishmael also has a Christmas E.G.O, someone who's also set out for revenge. Now there has been speculation before whether Outis wants to take revenge Odyssey style, but others say she's already completed her revenge mission. If you look at her base E.G.O, she speculates whether the Odyssey has a purpose or not, maybe meaning she already has taken that revenge, but doesn't know if it was even worth it or not, which all in all has been fueled by her pride. Now her corroded lines are, "Even crying, pouting kids got the presents," this being in relation to her not feeling deserving of the presents, but maybe also about seeing herself as a pouting kid. This could furthermore be connected to how she usually sucks up her own emotions in favor of serving those above her, like Dante, as in, "Don't cry and pout like a kid, follow orders." This relates well with Rudolta in general too, how the flavor text talked about the dream of being a nice enough kid deserving of gifts. But anyways, this E.G.O is all about wrath, which is described by Hohenheim as an indiscriminate and uncontrollable destruction like fire, again maybe being related to something like a war, although only as the skill, because funnily enough the sin affinities are lust, sloth, pride and envy. Now lust could be related to revenge, as it is about sharing a part of yourself with others, including human relationships in general, like being close enough with someone for revenge. Sloth maybe being her stuck in her old ways of revenge or her self-hatred, pride of course being her self-explanatory for Outis, and envy towards those who are actually innocents. But it's hard to find connections because we just don't know her story yet. Now art-wise, she wears the red and white hat of Sandalf, while Heathcliff of course wears the green and white hat. Now these could symbolize two sides of Rudolta and Sandalf, the red maybe being a reference to the wrath skill of Outis, and the green being a reference to the gluttony skill of Heathcliff. Now Sandalf really feels like everyone should get presents for some reason, as Outis is focused on crying kids getting presents, and Heathcliff wants jolly kids to get presents. Now these two colors could almost symbolize the naughty and nice idea of Christmas in general, and when in the normal idol version they look pretty similar, but when corroded they look completely different. Heathcliff is just a gift, and Outis seems to be carried by balloons and also looks like some sort of gift thingy with a bow. Now balloons have lots of symbolism, but for Outis the ones I think that fit are spiritual remembrance, like the revenge, or something like it being a metaphor for gaining a new perspective on something as you move from above. Maybe Outis reflects on her Odyssey days after it's over, like in her base E.G.O. Now the red balloon could symbolize love, the green growth, and the white, I don't know, come? I feel like I'm stretching a lot here to find connections, I don't know. One thing I do also find interesting though is that Outis has a bunch of yellow Christmas ornaments, like Christmas bells, or maybe something that actually attracts attention, perhaps to trick, maybe being a reference to how in her book counterpart she's actually behind the Trojan War. And for Heathcliff it's a yellow ribbon that covers something up, perhaps his past that he tried to bury. It could be that Heathcliff is a reference to the packaging bug E.G.O gift from Miracle on District 20, and Outis then a packaging ribbon, as that E.G.O gift gives benefits for those with wrath and envy. Lastly, the skill itself is an AoE attack weight, although targeted, perhaps like a targeted revenge that could influence others, but it's indiscriminate when corroded. SP is gained for the team in the normal form, as revenge could perhaps make someone gain sanity, but you could actually lose sanity from Outis when corroded, and even lose 10% of HP, again maybe being a reference to how revenge actually could make you hurt yourself in the process. The passive is called Fair Presents. There's actually so many references to naughty kids getting presents that I have a feeling Outis might have been a madness that was punished for it when she was a kid. Anyways, that passive works by giving random effects, so it's not that relevant I think. Sandalf can also be seen in the background attacking compared to Heathcliff's version being still. This is because even though Outis and Heathcliff both have it out for revenge, Outis is the one that might have already put it into action before joining Limbus company, and Heathcliff only went back to the Manor after joining Limbus. Also, I want to already comment on the background of the E.G.O, as it looks oddly similar to the Christmas Nightmare background. I made a connection at the time with the Gregor analysis that the ribbons that spread everywhere could be a reference to how Herman has her claws everywhere spread wide, aka her control, which I already admitted was a stretch, but now that I see this, I think it's just the city's way of decorating Christmas trees. Although Arcop Rodion decorates the tree completely different, since why do they use light bulbs here, but then she uses a normal star? Maybe it depends on the mirror world. The ribbons do look really cool though, even if they don't mean anything. Also, you see some of the little omes hiding in the background, which is almost cute, and you faintly see the strings used for Rudolta and Sandalf stitching, implying that the stitching together things must be an important part of the abnormality, yet I find stitching together hard to connect with both Outis and Heathcliff. Perhaps Outis is a person stitched together of herself, her work and other things, showing she isn't really authentic, or that Heathcliff is a person who was raised both by the back streets and the Manor, showing he's a stitched together person with different backgrounds, but I have no clue. Speaking of Heathcliff, let's go look at him. So I of course already mentioned some references between the abnormality and E.G.O towards Heathcliff, but I'm gonna gonna mention some other ones I was able to find. So the first thing I wanted to focus on was how Heathcliff's ego mostly differs from outis with the colors. Outis is about wrath, aka naughty kids that should deserve presents, and Heathcliff is green, aka gluttony, more so about how poor kids in the back streets couldn't get gifts. Hence why Sinclair doesn't have these egos. He's not behind thousands of deaths, and his parents could afford gifts for him. This is actually further supported by the recent release of E.G.O that talked about the hunger of the children of the back streets during Christmas time, maybe symbolized by the hole in the stomach of Rudolta. I feel like the ideal of Rudolta, that being it was born out of the hatred towards Christmas, with it being born from people that hadn't seen Santa Claus, aka they didn't get presents. Not only that, but E.G.O talks about how the back streets celebrated Christmas differently in general, how there weren't any decorations, aka it's likely that Heathcliff didn't celebrate Christmas much as a kid in the back streets, maybe in the manor though, but this idea of being related to poor kids not getting presents could also be backed up with the green hands of Rudolph's sleigh. You can say easily that green is related to gluttony, but it's not clear if green was related to gluttony yet at the time of making Lobotomy Corporation, since the literal king of greed in Library of Runa is yellow. But the hands on the sleigh are cut off, which is/was a punishment for stealing in some countries, meaning that it might also be a punishment in the city as well, since cultures overlap between us anyways. So this could be related to how some parents or even children stole gifts from other kids in the back street and got punished like this in return. I mean, the sin affinities from this ego are gluttony and envy, which I don't think I have to explain in relation to this. Heathcliff has a lot of relations to gifts in general, which I think could be taken literally in this context considering the references. The voice lines are, "Ha, you'll make a fine gift," which solidifies that idea, and when corroded it's, "Jolly kids deserve presents," which makes the difference between the meaning of it between outis and Heathcliff more apparent. Moral of the story, any kid deserves a present and a jolly time. Even when corroded, Heathcliff just turns into a gift, maybe referencing how Heathcliff wants to hide his real feelings for Kathy and maybe for others as well. So this is all pretty straightforward. So to move on, the passive is called infinite hatred, which is a relation to the quote from Rudolta itself, quote, "With my infinite hatred I give you this gift." I feel like this infinite hatred is just towards the injustice of the city in general, in relation to money. I've been silently writing a Heathcliff analysis in the background, and he's actually similar to Rodion in a way when it comes to money. He won't take action about it the same way she does, but he does make comments about the injustice of the city all the time. If you ever replay Limbus, count how many times Heathcliff makes a comment every time Honglu decides to open his mouth. But anyways, this would fit with the idea of the ego about the unfairness of poorer kids not getting presents. So those were the egos of Rudolta and Sandolph. Now let's look at the Christmas Nightmare egos. Let's start with Ishmael. Now Christmas Nightmare is actually way different from Sandolph and Rudolta. Its abnormality is actually based off of the fear of the monster being under your bed or your closet, FNAF 4 style. Now Cozy Bed is not only that, but also again playing the themes of wanting to hide a certain side of yourself, a monstrous side. For Gregor that would be his arm of course. But if you remember how feral Ishmael used to be for Count of 5, then the reason she has this ego also makes sense. Ishmael is also carrying the Snuff Lantern ego gift you can get from the Miracle in District 20 Buck Gag, where if the target is staggered, in low morale, or in panic, it applies more trimmer count. I think this ego is connected to Ishmael in the way that she also was in low morale or some sort of panic before the events of Canto 5. She was completely in doubt of Limbus Company boss's ability to sail the Great Lake. This can be backed up by the fact that the tentacles from Gregor and Ishmael are different. For Ishmael it's purely sea creatures' tentacles. It's shown in a funny way though, as the Christmas balls almost look like the suckers of tentacles. Low morale is also seen in the attack skill, as if the target has less than 0 SP, it does more damage. And her passive, Gaze in the Shadows, is another reference to curiosity towards her darker side. The monster under Ishmael's bed she's hiding from is not just the sea monsters, but also her trauma, as in the Mirror Dungeon event you see some candles lit while others are snuffed out, perhaps representing some dead comrades from her ship. Not only that, but Ishmael of course puts out some sort of mask, as she's normally really strict about rules as a result of her time with Ahab, but when we neared Canto 5 she became more and more unhinged, and her voice line reflects that mask, or hiding she wants to put on. Quote, "A monster? What are you? You gotta be hallucinating or something. Ha! No one saw that, right?" She doesn't want the others to see her as a monster, and her corroded lines is, quote, "Curiosity is a dangerous thing, you know. Too much of it and darkness will eat you whole." Now, curiosity could refer to her old mentality of being bored of her old fixer life and becoming curious to sail the Great Lake, which ended in tragedy, or just how people shouldn't be curious about her mental state in general. Sloth appears as well, probably about how she might be stuck in her mentality of revenge. Anytime someone gave her advice, she stood stuck in that mentality. Only after Canto 5 she seemed to change. Then it's gluttony and pride, which I feel also fit with revenge, as essentially it's a selfish idea, as revenge usually doesn't help that much to the people around you, and pride, as Ishmael's pride got destroyed by Ahab, and now she's unhinged about Ahab. Now in the background you see some feathers, that along with the fact that feathers are on her outfit too, but the symbolism I googled doesn't really fit. But ripped apart pillows could symbolize emotional turmoil, or the fact that Ishmael couldn't sleep well until she got her revenge. It's literally a ripped bed pillow, it makes sense. Also, the plushie featured on the corroded version is holding out a warm chalky milk with some gingerbread cookies. I think this might be be a reference to something like luring, perhaps luring the whale, or even the idea that she got lured by Ahab and eventually got betrayed. Now, the red and green here is featured again, with the sock Ishmael is holding out, it being red. As for wrath, it fits the revenge, and green for Gregor, something gluttonous. But the gluttony is hard to connect to Gregor, really. Also, speaking of Gregor, even though he has a lot of ties to Judaism, only Ishmael has the Jewish Star of David. But its meaning is purely tied to the religion, so I can't find the connections with Ishmael or Gregor at all. But let's move on to Gregor now. Now, I've already explained Christmas Nightmare for Gregor in my Gregor analysis video, but it doesn't hurt to give another summary. But if you want more in depth, go watch that video. So it's pretty obvious that the monster for Gregor is himself, and his arm specifically. His voice lines is, quote, "You saw a monster, huh? Did it look anything like this by chance?" Basically tells us he sees himself as a monster, and if a monster's under the bed or in the closet, it's basically a pest, which is how he also sees himself and his bug features. The corroded voice lines are, quote, "Fear, horror, and anxiety. In the shadow beneath your bed lies a monster." This is probably more a reference to wars though, I think, as in the shadow of fear and horror is the monster, as Gregor is basically overshadowed by the war as a person. He never got to be his own person due to the control of Herman, and as a result, he is turned into a monster. This idea is further symbolized by the tentacles that look more like a bunch of bug arms. It's not like Ishmael's where it's coming out of her dress, as her monster, her unhinged side, is something she's hiding, but for Gregor it's purely from his arm, referencing his past and Herman. This comment mentioned something I missed last video though, and that is that Gregor likes to act aloof and harmless to trick people he's okay, as a way for him to cope. It's why his egos are often themed after ambushes. Makes sense as he hid from people in his book counterpart too. He hid underneath his bedroom couch so that his family wouldn't be scared of him. Also, the E.G.O gift snuffed candlestick comes back a bunch of times. Not only is he holding it, also when corroded, it's in the place where Ishmael holds out the chocolate milk and cookies. Now the E.G.O gift itself also works on low morale, panicked and staggered enemies, but instead of tremor it inflicts offensive defense level down against all enemies. Perhaps how Gregor is also in low morale when thinking about the war, or his arm in general. The snuffed candles being symbolism for lost comrades then would also fit with the war, and why Gregor is holding it. Although Gregor isn't set out for revenge like Ishmael is, so maybe that's why he has the green sock instead of the red one. I do think it's funny though how Ishmael and Gregor parallel with Outis and Heathcliff. His plushie also has one ripped off arm, of course symbolizing his bug arm, and he looks pretty traumatized. Also in the background of the E.G.O art, you see an arm reach out of the closet, again just more bug arm symbolism. Now E.G.O background wise, I can't really connect it more to Gregor or Ishmael at all, just that the shadow arms might represent the past haunting them, base E.G.O style, or how the hands symbolize control, something grabby like how Ishmael and Gregor were both under control of a tyrannous leader. The molten clock being symbolism for how the fear of the past might have let them lose track of time, and the ribbons make an appearance here again, like in the background of the holidays E.G.O, but I just can't for the life of me figure out what it means. And this skull still also remains a mystery. Now affinity wise, it's sloth, gluttony, gloom, and pride. Sloth of course being stuck in the fear of the past, gluttony maybe being a reference to how the war itself was gluttonous with its soldiers' deaths, but again I find it hard to connect. Gloom to how Gregor is more sad and gloomy about the idea of his arm and seeing himself as low as a pest and a monster, and pride perhaps as a victim mentality, where you don't think you're in the wrong even though you have a low self-esteem. So, feeling jolly yet? Not really, these E.G.Os were quite depressing, but hey, at least you're not Aircorp Road at the end of her story, am I right? Thank you all for watching, I hope you all have a happy holidays and I hope you liked the video. If you did, why not subscribe? It's a small effort and I'd love to build a community of Project Moon fans or any project fans in general who love overanalyzing as much as I do. And of course, if you have your own connections you want to share, or if you want to correct me on anything, feel free to do so. Also, thank you for my YouTube members for the support. Dylan Zambrano and Dark Mage for the 1 month pickling, Runout Media for the 2 month pickling, and Tiny Scale for the 2 month pickled. You can become a YouTube member starting at $1 if you want to help the channel out.
You sure you want me to remove my socks? I've been wearing them all day long. My feet must be incredibly foul. Oh, you actually prefer them when they are stinky? That is so strange.